He thought he was running from his past, but the mirror had been waiting for him all along. It was a rainy evening when Thomas first heard the legend. A small village, tucked between jagged mountain peaks, whispered about a mirror that didn't reflect faces, but truths. They said the mirror revealed what people were running from. Not the lies they told the world, not the masks they wore every day, but the thoughts, fears, and regrets they buried deep inside. Thomas had spent years avoiding his own mind. Every morning he woke up with a knot in his chest, a whisper of guilt that followed him like a shadow. Mistakes, words said too late, chances missed. They piled up, one on top of the other. He thought moving towns, changing jobs, even changing friends might help. But no matter where he went, the same restless feeling followed. And that night, staring at the storm through his rain-streaked window, he wondered if the village legend might hold something real, something terrifying, but honest. He didn't believe in magic. He didn't believe in curses. He believed in facts, logic, the concrete reality of life. Yet something about the story called to him. Maybe it was the idea of seeing himself, really seeing himself, without excuses. Or maybe it was the desperation that comes when you've run long enough and there's nowhere left to hide. Either way, he packed a small bag the next morning and left. The village was smaller than he imagined. Cobbled streets twisted around mossy stone cottages. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys. The kind of place where time felt slower, where people spoke quietly, as if the mountains themselves might be listening. Thomas asked around about the mirror. Most people shook their heads or smiled politely. "Don't go looking for what you're not ready to see," one old woman warned, her eyes glinting like river stones. But Thomas didn't stop. Deep in the forest that bordered the village, he found the temple. It was unassuming. Weathered stone, overgrown ivy, a wooden door that creaked as he pushed it open. Inside, the air was thick with incense, and the silence was so profound it pressed against his ears. And there, at the far end of a candlelit hall, was the mirror. It wasn't large, not ornate, just a plain frame, the glass slightly warped with age. But the moment Thomas stood before it, the air seemed to shift. The reflection staring back wasn't quite his own. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light. Then, the images began. The first thought that hit him wasn't a memory. It was a feeling. A heavy, sinking sense of shame for all the times he'd let people down. His parents, friends, colleagues. The faces of those he hurt flickered across the glass. Words he wished he hadn't spoken. Moments he wished he could erase. And alongside them, thoughts he never admitted aloud. Fear, jealousy, the small betrayals that made him human. Thomas stepped back, heart racing. He wanted to look away. But curiosity, stubbornness, and something deeper, a need for truth, kept him rooted. The mirror didn't stop. Every secret he'd buried, every regret he'd locked behind a polite smile, was laid bare. And then, the worst part, it wasn't just the past. The mirror reflected what he feared most about the future. Failure, loneliness, becoming someone he despised. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time seemed to dissolve. And then, he noticed something subtle. It wasn't enough to just see his thoughts. The mirror was showing him a choice. For every fear, every regret, there was a flicker of another possibility. Moments where he could have acted differently, where he could act differently still. He realized something crucial. The mirror didn't punish. It didn't mock. It simply forced honesty. And honesty, he learned that night, was heavier than he ever imagined. And yet, strangely liberating. Thomas left the temple as the first light of dawn touched the peaks. The mirror behind him was silent. The forest seemed unchanged. And yet, everything in him had shifted. He was still afraid. He was still flawed. But for the first time in years, he understood that fear and regret were only obstacles if he let them control him. The mirror hadn't shown him the end. It had shown him a beginning. Days turned into weeks. Thomas began to live differently. Small actions, mindful choices, apologizing to people he'd ignored, saying what he felt before it was too late, embracing moments without waiting for perfection. And when he felt fear creeping back, he remembered the mirror. Not its images, but the lesson behind them. That facing your thoughts, instead of running, is the first step to freedom. No one would ever know exactly what he saw in that temple. Some might call it legend, some might call it superstition. But Thomas knew. Sometimes the hardest truths are the ones we hide from ourselves. And sometimes the smallest acts of courage, standing still in front of a mirror, letting your own mind speak, are the ones that change everything. He never returned to the temple. He didn't need to, because the mirror had already left its mark, not on his eyes, but on his mind. And every day since, he carried a quiet strength, a reminder that happiness isn't found in running from what scares us. It's found in looking directly at it and deciding, despite fear, to move forward anyway. And so, the mirror waits, waiting for the next person who thinks they're lost, waiting for the one willing to see themselves fully, without excuse. And for those brave enough, the reflection isn't punishment, it's freedom. The mirror doesn't lie, and neither should you. Face yourself. It's the only way to finally be free.